Hey everyone, it's Robert with the Piston Slap channel, and I'd like to thank you today for tuning in to hear about my in-depth review of the 2017 Triumph Tiger. This is going to be a long video that will cover everything I love and hate about the Tiger. I'm going to try to keep this as unbiased as possible, so if you're in the market for an adventure bike and the Triumph Tiger is on your list, sit back, grab a drink as we dive into this bike. When looking for a middle-of-the-road adventure bike, there is a lot to choose from in today's market. Today I'm going to focus in on the Triumph Tiger, the good, the bad, and the ugly about it. Let's start with all the ugly things that I have found and noticed in the last 500 miles of riding and ownership. First thing is the tires. While the manufacturers really have no idea for each individual person and what their intent is with the bike, the Bridgestone tires that come on the Tiger are ugly, and that would be an understatement. They rate them as a 90-10 tire, meaning 90% pavement, tarmac, and 10% dirt. As I plan on doing a lot of adventure riding, I expect to be riding a lot of dirt. That's where all the good stuff is. Anyway, in the last 5,000 miles, I have lost count of how many times the front has suddenly lost traction and washed out. Thankfully, I was able to save it and prevent an accident. The rear tire works fine as long as you're on the dirt, and just that, dirt. Loose dirt, sand, silt, mud, they all but cripple the tire from doing its job, even when aired down. Now, I will admit I am surprised when the pressure is dropped to the mid-20s how much better the tires do, but there are better tires out there more suited for the jobs at hand. Moving on to the stock windscreen. On the XC lineup, it is okay in just that. At any speed above 40 miles per hour, you get what the forums call the Tiger roar. The problem is that the height and width of the screen are very minimal, and it allows the wind to hit you at the top of your helmet and your shoulders. It does a decent job at keeping the bugs and road debris off the lower portion of your helmet and your chest, but that's about it. Many have tried different alternatives and most of them have failed. This of course is dependent on the size of the rider. But the reality is we are out to adventure, and do you really want a gigantic battle shield in front of you? I don't, so I've learned to live with what I have. Triumph wasn't really thinking much when they decided to put a service indicator on the display. The service indicator is for reminding you that your bike needs service. For a person like me, I don't mind having a redundancy for service. It almost makes one less thing that I have to keep track of. So here's why Triumph falls into that ugly category. The service indicator comes on and starts counting backwards as if they want you to know how far you've gone past the service. Second thing on this is that the display was only able to show 999 miles. It gets worse. As an end user, or a rider, you are not able to reset this indicator. You can only have it done at the dealership, or by purchasing an aftermarket scan tool and software to reset it. I don't favor having to make a trip to the dealer every time I need the service indicator reset. Next up are the rider modes. Oh yes, there is a handful of menus and submenus coupled with tiny display readouts for all sorts of stuff. But what I want to talk to you about is strictly the rider modes. On the Triumph Tiger 800, you get three main modes: rider, road, and off-road. Of the three modes, rider mode is the only one that is customizable. In rider mode, you have map settings for throttle, fuel, and whatnot, traction control settings, ABS settings, stuff like that. Here lays the problem. You can't change any of these modes or settings while riding. Second off, if you put the bike in off-road mode, it will change back to road mode when you turn the bike off using the key. I did find that in the rider mode you could customize it, and it will retain the settings while it was in rider mode. But if you set the rider mode up for off-road, then it will bypass it and put it back into road mode. Now you might think, well, this isn't really a big deal, but hear me out. So you're out in the sticks riding, and you pull over to snap some pictures, get a drink of water, do whatever. If you're like me, you're on and off the bike throughout the day, and when you're doing 200 to 300 miles in the dirt, when you get back in the saddle and fire the bike up, the bike automatically sets itself back to road mode. Well, this gets really irritating. I will probably wear out the buttons long before I ever wear out the tires. That is why I put the menus in the ugly category. So that's pretty much it for the ugly. Let's move on to the bad. And when I say bad, I mean things that could be better but still work. Let's start out with the front fender. It works for the average person. If you plan to put a more aggressive tire on it, well, the clearance between the tire and the front fender are going to be taken up. So if you get a decent sized rock or some mud on the front tire, it's going to rip the front fender off. There is an aftermarket remedy available to raise it, but it's just one of those things that could have been done better at the factory. Next up is the engine's air filter. It's a pain in the butt to get access to. Hopefully you will never need to service it when you're out on the trail. Anyway, here's my gripe with it. It's a paper-only filter on a bike that's supposed to go on and off-road. And when you go off-road, you tend to get this thing called dust. The Tiger 800 setup seems to be backwards thinking to me. First, they use the paper element. That would work fine on the streets, but not so fine in the dirt. Second, they put the air intake under the rider's seat. To me, this seems like a bad place for these reasons. Dust. The dust that the bike itself is kicking up is going to find its way into the air box and filter. It's kind of low on the bike, so deep water crossings will need to be taken with care or caution. They could have made the air intake up front and high to get that clean air for most of the time when you're out riding. Also, a better filter would be nice. A 2-stage foam filter that would be serviceable would be awesome. So on to the suspension. While the Tiger has a fantastic setup from WP, it seems to be a bit soft even when cranked all the way up. Also, the adjustments seem to be very basic and lacking. Another thing is the rear suspension. If you need to adjust it with the stock tools, forget it. I put the suspension in the bad category just because I know there is better stuff out there, or they could have done a better job by including high speed and low speed compression and rebound settings for the front and rear. The springs could have been stiffer or progressive to suit the heavier riders or payload. Finally, the last thing on the bad list is the power ports. While most may say it's just a power port, how could you find a fault with it? Here's where I'm going with this. I live in the United States. I'm not sure what 12-volt power ports look like in other countries, but here they are about the size of your thumb. The Tiger comes with these tiny power ports that you have to buy an adapter to plug your accessories into. Where Triumph fails is in two places. One, they could have just made a US version that was built with the standard 12-volt socket, or they could have included the adapters for the country you're in. You'll need to purchase your own adapter to make it all work. To me, it's more things I have to remember to pack when heading out. Now the moment you guys have all been waiting for, the good. And believe me, there is a lot of it. To get things started on, we will go straight to the heart of the beast, the 3-cylinder 800 engine. The power from this engine is super smooth. As you go through the RPM, the 800 picks up in the mid area, then seems to just flatten out a little bit at the top. I don't normally ride around the 10,000 RPM neighborhood, but it sure is fun when I do. The transmission is a 6-speed manual and shifts buttery smooth. Next up are the controls and settings. I have seen countless reviews on the bike, and one of the complaints is the layout of the menus and displays. At first it's a bit confusing, but I found myself right at home after using them for a bit. I will do a video on all the features and submenus later, but for now I just want to lay out some of the basics. You have fuel level, engine temp, trips, odometers, outside air, and rider modes. All these accompanied with an easy-to-read digital speedometer and an analog tach. Next up is the lighting. The Triumph Tiger comes with a fantastic setup for lighting, with a dual low beam at 55 watts and a high beam at 65, accompanied with LED fog or driving lights. Really do a great job when out on the trail. I've ridden through the forest at night and have found that I really didn't have a need for any extra lighting. Although someday I might add more just for looks, there's not much more you could really want with the lighting, so there's not much more to go on about it. It's a simple design that just works. The seating on the Tiger is great for long trips. I have personally put 300 plus miles in on one day and still felt good at the end of the day. I've also done multi-day trips where I'm on and off the road, on and off the bike, and by the end of the day, it left me wanting more. The seat is on the softer side of things, but still has enough padding and firmness to keep your rear end happy. There are options to have a heated seat, which I can tell you is fantastic when you have a cold morning. The main rider seat is also adjustable with a high and low position. I've tried both and find that I personally like the high position. Standing on the bike while riding seems to feel almost like the bike was made for me. I'm 5'11", and when standing, the tank feels like it becomes part of me. The handlebars are adjustable if you need, but I felt right at home with where they were from the factory. The optional pegs from Triumph are wide enough to keep from pressing through the bottoms of your boot and keep your feet comfortable and stationary. Next up is the stock engine protection. The stock engine protection may look minimal, but has worked for me when I stalled the bike on an incline, rolled backwards, and then fell off. While there are many aftermarket crash bars on the market, a fellow adventure rider told me this: some of the best crash protection can't protect you from every type of crash. Thinking about this while I was riding down the trail got me to be looking around and thinking, with trees and rocks, canyons, high-speed runs, and such, it would be hard to build a bar that would work in every scenario. For me, I got lucky. I was moving at a really slow speed, landed in a soft section of dirt that had been turned up from previous riders. It left my bike without a scratch. Well, I could go on and on about the Triumph Tiger and all the good things. I do need to call it for this video. If you are wanting to see more about what I do with this Tiger, I encourage you to click on the subscribe button at the bottom of the video player. If you like what I've done here today, a thumbs up is always appreciated. And if you have any questions about the Tiger, drop a comment down in the section below. I'll get back to you. Thanks again for tuning into the Piston Slap channel. I'm Robert, and I will see you guys next week.